Hello everybody, welcome to another one of our Idiot's Guides. I'm Ash and I'm going to be your local idiot here to teach you all the things you need to know about being a gladiator. Remember, if you find anything in an Idiot's Guide that you actually enjoy, head pats and ear rubs are always welcome. Now, Gladiator is the first tank class we'll be going over in an Idiot's Guide, so there will be a number of new features that we need to cover. We're going to start that off with covering the most important thing for any tank to understand, and that's enmity. If you've played other MMOs, you probably would know this as aggro. And it's basically telling you which of your party members the enemy is actually interested in attacking. Now, there's an easy enough way to look at enmity. I could show it off a little bit right here. That right there is my enemy list. It shows off the enemy that I'm fighting, and then next to it, it shows off the enmity. And right now, that's telling me that he's focusing on me. So the enmity can actually have three general shapes, and I'll show them off right here. If you're looking at these three enemies and the three different enmity images, or three different enmity shapes and colors next to their names, you can see that when it's green, it means that the enemy is not interested in you at all. They're not focusing on you. This doesn't mean they won't end up hitting you if you step into some AoE attack they're using on someone else, but they're not interested in attacking you specifically. Now, if the enmity has this yellow color, is kind of blinking between like yellow, orange, reddish, that means that you're getting very close to the top of that enemy's list. Right? You're pulling a lot of enmity from the enemy, which means you're not their target right now. But if you keep pushing them, you might soon get the top of their enmity list and become their target. Now, if it's red, like this here, then that means that you are the target of the enemy's enmity. You are the one they're attacking, and they're focusing on you to the exclusion of everybody else. Alright? These are the things that you need to understand about enmity, kind of when you're playing other classes, but most notably when you're playing a tank, because you pretty much want every single enemy in the world to have this red symbol and be focused on you. That's your job as a tank. There's a little bit more to it as you get to higher level content, but that's not really covered here in this lower 1 to 30-ish area, so we'll cover that later. Your tank is going to function similarly to a lot of your DPS classes, your physical DPS based classes, and you're going to have combos, you're going to have single target and AoE, you're going to have some buffs, and we can go over pretty much all of that right now. Your basic combo is going to be your simple 1, 2, 3. On Gladiator, that's going to be your Fast Blade into Riot Blade into Rage of Halone. Now that means if you execute any of these attacks on their own, they'll do a decent amount of damage. But if you execute them in order, as you can see with this dotted line going around the skill, that's the combo. As long as you're following that combo, you're going to be getting extra bonuses out of it. As you can see, it says it has a combo potency, right? So this attack really isn't going to be all that useful. It's only going to deal a potency of 100 to enemies, but if you combo it successfully, you're going to more than triple the amount of damage you're doing from it. And that's only for now. Later on, as you level up even further, there will be even more reasons to combo successfully, because you'll get extra features. You may get attacks that'll heal you every time you use them, as long as you're using them in a combo, or attacks that give you damage buffs for 10 seconds, 15, 20 seconds, as long as you're comboing them properly. So remember, always try to keep up with your combo. Rather than just using whatever attack whenever, it's not going to be very useful. Always try to follow the proper combo so that you're getting the most out of your attacks. Now, beyond your single target combo, by the time you've reached level 30, in fact by level 6, the Gladiator also gets his first AoE attack, and it's just a straight up spin all around yourself. You're going to hit all the enemies near you, and it's got decent range. I mean, look, I'm standing right next to this striking dummy, and I'm still hitting that one over there with my AoE. From about here. Even from there. Right? It's got a decent range. Now, an AoE attack is generally not going to be as good as a combo unless you're dealing with generally about 3 or more enemies at a time. You'll usually get a better amount of damage out of using your AoE than using your combo at that point. But what an AoE attack is really good for is making sure to grab all of the enemy's attention and pull all their enmity to you. So if you have a bunch of enemies that are right nearby you, you can use an AoE attack and grab all of their enmity all at once and make them all focus on you. It's also good for keeping it. If you are using your single target combo to do better damage against an enemy, but you want to make sure you're keeping the enmity of all the others around you so that they're not choosing to go focus on your allies that are nearby, then you can do a single target combo once, twice, however many times, but if you see the enemy's enmity is starting to slip away from you, you can just hit an AoE attack and pull their enmity back to you. So beyond the single target and the AoE attacks that you get as a Gladiator, which is all pretty simple, you also get buffs. Now the buff that you're going to get as a Gladiator at this level is going to be Fight or Flight. For 25 seconds, you deal 25% more damage, and that's wonderful. If you're fighting enemies and your Fight or Flight ability is off cooldown, then use it. It's just a straight up damage boost, so if you have it, use it. And it'll just help you deal more damage to whoever you're fighting. Now we're going to get into what's pretty much the bread and butter of any tank class in this game. And that's mitigation. By mitigation, what I mean is methods of reducing the damage you're going to take from enemies. This can show up in a number of different ways. Generally, you can get ones that heal you, like some abilities will when you combo them, or provide shields. Some abilities will do that, or provide damage reduction, or even there's another one that I tend to think of as mitigation that perhaps some other people don't. But at this low level, on Gladiator, you really end up with, I'd say, 4 mitigation abilities that spread across kind of 2 different types of mitigation. Alright, so first I'm going to go over your basic mitigation that everyone would consider a method for damage mitigation. And that is presented in 2 abilities. And every single tank in the game gets both of these abilities. That's your Rampart and your Reprisal. Let me move that a little bit. Rampart is pretty simple. For 20 seconds, you take 20% less damage. From everything, as far as I know. Alright, anything that's going to damage you is going to deal 20% less damage. This is a great one to have. It lasts a decent amount of time. It reduces damage a decent amount. It's a good one to use. You're not going to need to save this for a special moment. You're not going to need to hold on to it for a specific thing. Got a bit of a recast time, but you get enough different types of damage mitigation on tanks that you don't need to worry about hoarding them. And you also don't need to worry about trying to pop all of them at once. It can reduce damage even more, but there are diminishing returns on mitigation. Any damage reduction type mitigation tends to be multiplicative in nature, which means the more of them you're using, the less overall benefit you're getting. So they tend to be better to be used over time, like one at a time. Each time you need to slightly reduce the damage, maybe two at a time if you're taking a lot of damage. But this is just the most basic form of mitigation, and it's to just reduce the damage that's coming in, right? Grab enemies' attention, pull them towards you, pop Rampart. This can even be used when you're running through enemies and pulling a bunch of different groups at the same time. Because it just reduces all incoming damage and there's no extra side things you need to keep track of, you can pop this while you're running through a bunch of groups, grab all their attention, and this will keep reducing the amount of damage they're doing to you as you go. The other one is Reprisal, and Reprisal is similar but not the same as Rampart, because Reprisal does not affect you. And that's an important thing to note. Reprisal does not affect the damage you take. It affects the damage enemies do. That's the difference. Reprisal affects an area around you. This is not, like Rampart, an ability you should really be using as you're running through and pulling groups of enemies, because it's not really going to carry as you're running across a dungeon. Reprisal is better suited for once you've pulled a bunch of enemies and they're all gathering around you within about 5 yalms of you, so they're all kind of right around you trying to attack you. You can pop Reprisal. For the next 10 seconds, all those enemies that were around you are going to deal 10% less damage to you. Alright? Rampart tends to be good in general, even when running through a dungeon. Reprisal tends to be good when you're standing still with enemies gathered around you attacking you. But both of them do the same basic thing. They reduce, in the case of Rampart, the amount of damage you take, and in the case of Reprisal, the amount of damage enemies around you do to you. Those are what people would understand as mitigation. Most people would accept them as mitigation. Everyone should. But there are other methods of what I think of as mitigation that people might try to debate you on. The other type of mitigation that I see in the game is taking an enemy out of the fight temporarily. This means the enemy is dealing no damage to you, and that, as far as I'm concerned, is a type of damage mitigation. Sometimes you may be dealing with a very strong enemy that's going to do a lot of damage, and if you can take that enemy out of the fight, that's going to reduce a lot of the damage you're taking in. And in that case, there are another 2 skills that fall in this category. The simplest and most basic is Low Blow. It's pretty easy to use, has a pretty short recast time, and it stuns a target for 5 seconds. You're not going to affect an entire group with this, but if you have an enemy that's dealing lots of damage to you, you can target that enemy and hit them with Low Blow and stun them. Should be noted, stun is not going to affect every single enemy in the game. Some enemies can resist it, other enemies can be completely immune to being stunned. Sometimes you just need to sort of test it out and see if it works. Low Blow's got a low enough recast time that this isn't just a damage mitigation thing. You ought to be using this for a couple different reasons, so you'll kind of get used to what enemies it'll work on and which ones it won't. Generally, it's not going to work on like bosses or mini bosses, though occasionally it does. And generally, it's just not going to work on really strong enemies. But it can work on a number of those that fall into the niche of being strong enough to be worried about, but not so strong that they're just like immune to all your stuns. 5 seconds may not seem like a lot, but 5 seconds, if you're taking a lot of damage from this enemy and they are not resistant to stun, 5 seconds can be the difference between your healer or yourself being able to heal you up in time and you dying. It can be enough. Right? And Low Blow is OGCD. It's off the global cooldown, so you can pop Low Blow. You can weave it right into the middle of whatever else you're doing as soon as it's available, whenever you want. And that's nice to have. The other one is the same effect, but you have to use it a little differently. That's Shield Bash. Again, it stuns. Just like Low Blow, this is a way to stun an enemy. And this one lasts 6 seconds rather than 5 seconds. Not a whole lot of difference, really. Effectively, it's going to be about the same. The only thing you need to keep track of with Shield Bash is Shield Bash is not an ability. It's a weapon skill. It's on the global cooldown. Which means that when an enemy starts doing a mechanic that you might be able to interrupt by just stunning them, you can instantly pop Low Blow and stun them and interrupt the mechanic. Or if they're dealing a lot of damage to you or about to deal a lot of damage to you, you can pop Low Blow instantly and interrupt them or just take them out of the fight for a little while. Shield Bash, on the other hand, if you're in the middle of doing attacks, you're not going to be able to just use Shield Bash whenever you want. You have to wait. You have to wait until your global cooldown finishes before you'll be able to use Shield Bash. Right? So you can't weave Shield Bash. You have to use it as you would use other skills. Other weapon skills, specifically. Those are really all the ways that you can mitigate damage. Like I said, either straight up damage reduction or by taking stronger enemies out of the fight for a little while. Gives you enough time to recover, restore health, maybe fall back, maybe use a potion, maybe find a different tactic, something like that. Right? And that's really all you need sometimes to stay alive. You do have one other attack that you have available to you. This is your ranged attack. There. That's the range. Right there. For Shield Lob. You're not a ranged combatant. You're a tank. You're meant to fight in melee range. But the point of Shield Lob is you can use it to pull enemies from a distance. So when you're going in towards a group of enemies, you can lob your shield at one before you're actually in range and sort of pull the group or pull the enemy or whatever. The other benefit of Shield Lob is right there on the card in the description. Additional effect, increased enmity. Shield Lob gives you more enmity on an enemy than normal attacks do. Why is that good? If you end up losing an enemy's enmity, or if a new group of enemies spawn in and start running off towards the rest of your party, Shield Lob is a decent way to not have to run all over the battlefield, dragging a group of enemies around with you, spinning them around in circles while your party's trying to attack them from behind, while you're going off to get all the other enemies. You can instead just sort of stand right where you are with the group of enemies you're already fighting, and then just chuck your shield across the battlefield and hit another enemy and pull them towards you. Right? It's a good way to grab an enemy's attention from a distance without having to leave what you're doing at the moment. And there's one other way to do that. Shield Lob is on the global cooldown, so you do have to use it like normal attacks. You can't just weave it at a moment's notice anytime you want. But the fact that it's a weapon skill means it doesn't have a long recast time. You can use it every single time your global cooldown is done. You can use a Shield Lob, so you can just use it again and again and again as many times as you really need to, as long as you're willing to wait the 2.5 seconds for it. The other mechanic that you can use to get enemy attention is called Provoke. This one's off the global cooldown. It's an OGCD ability, which can make it great if you need to grab an enemy's attention right this second. If letting that enemy focus on anyone but you for even like 1 second longer is just not going to be a good thing, you can just use Provoke and grab that enemy's attention. You will immediately shoot straight to the top of their enmity list, so they'll immediately start focusing on you. Alright? It's a good way to do it, but it does have a 30-second recast time. So, kind of maneuvering, if it's one enemy, you can use whichever one you want. It really doesn't matter. But if a group of enemies spawns and starts going after your party, I might start with like lobbing a shield at one of them and then provoking another and then throwing a shield at another of them, you know, just sort of weave back and forth between the two. And that's how you're going to have to do it, right? Use a shield lob as soon as you can. Use your provoke. Then it's on cooldown for 30 seconds. So focus on shield lobs from there if you have a bunch more enemies to grab. And that's how it's going to go. The last thing here that's covered in actual tank mechanics, that's your tank stance. In the case of Gladiator, it's Iron Will. It'll be called different things on different classes or jobs. It'll pretty much always say that it significantly increases enmity generation. If the skill says that, then that's your tank stance. And it's pretty simple. As long as that's turned on, every single thing that you do will increase the amount of enmity you generate against whoever you're doing it to. That is exactly how you're able to tank in this game. You turn your tank stance on, and then you just go and fight enemies. As long as you're doing anything to the enemies, you're most likely going to be number one on their enmity list. It's very difficult for anyone else in your party to generate enough enmity fast enough to pull the enemy's attention off of you as long as your tank stance is on and you're hitting that enemy occasionally. Now, this could get a little more clunky later on. Right now, all you need to worry about for tank stance at these low levels is you're not really going to need it in solo content, but if you're in party content, you basically just want to have your tank stance on always. Turn it on at the beginning of a dungeon or trial or whatever, and just leave it on forever. Now, the use case thing of where you might want to have it turned off in party content tends to deal with main tank and off tank in any content that has two tanks in it. A main tank's job is generally turn their tank stance on, grab the boss's attention, and keep the boss focused on them and turned around from the party. An off tank, their job is generally, if there are any adds, any other enemies other than the boss that spawn in the fight, grab those enemies' attention and pull them sort of away from the boss somewhere else and keep them focused on them. And that's pretty much how it'll go. You get interject, which is one of our sort of situational use case things, but a lot of classes get interject. I've already gone over it. It's a way to interrupt an action. That covers pretty much everything that a gladiator is going to get by level 30 of their class. Beyond that, you're already getting to the point where you should be getting your job pretty soon, so we'll deal with more mechanics on that when I start going over the jobs. And this also covers, honestly, more than everything you really need to know as a low-level tank. 99% of other people playing this game at this low level are not going to know even half of what I've gone over with you today. And a lot of the situational stuff I went over for tanks, main tank, off tank, all that stuff, is stuff that you're not going to need to worry about very often. Anyway, thanks for joining me for another Idiot's Guide, and hopefully I was able to teach you guys something. If you're interested in seeing some of the other classes, or hopefully later some jobs, or even other features of the game, go ahead and stick around. Like the video, subscribe if you want to see more stuff, all the usual, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.